friendly terms with the English. One of them, Manteo, traveled twice to England and was made a lord by Queen Elizabeth I. White also wrote that the settlers intended to move 50 miles into the Main, an apparent reference to an inland site. The governor never located the settlers, who included his daughter Eleanor Dare and his granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. So this is where it gets interesting. So the case went cold until about 2012. Researchers noticed a patch on a watercolor map of eastern North Carolina painted by White. Beneath the patch, they found an image of a fort at the head of Albemarle Sound. Its location is 50 miles to the west of Roanoke Island, matching the governor's account. On top of the patch was another faint outline of a fort. This was drawn in what analysts said was invisible ink. So scholars speculated that White wanted to hide the existence of the fort from the Spanish, who viewed the Roanoke venture as a threat to their domination of North America and the critical shipping lanes off North Carolina's Outer Banks. The Spanish sent an expedition to wipe out the rogue colony, but they, too, failed to find the settlers. In 2015, Luccheti's team excavated the area marked on the map, close to a Native American village called Metacom. Since early European colonists typically built their settlements near Native American sites, this seemed a good place to start. Clay Swindle, an archaeologist associated with the First Colony Foundation who examined Metacom, said the Palisade village was home to some 80 to 100 people. Just outside its wall, at a place they called Site X, Luccheti's team found no fort, but they did uncover 24 pieces of English pottery that they maintained likely belonged to the Lost Colony survivors. In January, the archaeologists excavated in a field 2 miles north of Site X, which they dubbed Site Y. Here, they found European ceramics in far greater number and variety than at Site X. Luccheti contends that at least some of the settlers moved from Roanoke after White's 1587 departure, bringing along their European ceramics. He says that a small group, possibly a single family, may have taken up farming alongside their Native American neighbors as they waited in vain for a rescue. So William Kelso, an archaeologist who led the effort to uncover the 1607 Jamestown fort, is confident the finds solve one of the greatest mysteries in early American history, the Odyssey of the Lost Colony. Other archaeologists, however, warn against jumping to conclusions. I am skeptical, says Charles Ewan, an archaeologist at East Carolina University. They're looking to prove rather than seeking to disprove their theory, which is the scientific way. So the scientific way is to always, you want to disprove the fact. So it's kind of like when you, so it's kind of like how analytics work, right? So if you really love lollipops and you go online and you're searching for lollipops and there's amazing lollipops, they're the greatest lollipops in the world, and you find out all of the ingredients in the lollipops and you find out how they can help you be a better person. You'll find a million different facts or people saying that lollipops are amazing and you've always been right, they're wonderful, and they're perfect for you. However, if you go into this saying, why are lollipops bad for me? You will find a ton of different information in scientists, and it'll explain why lollipops are bad for you. So that is a scientific way. So you always want to try to find you always want to disprove the theory, right? Historians in their excitement to, I think we'd have talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Okay, so it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, right? You're researching something for years. Like for me, I've been researching Malaga Island for over 10 years. And for me, I am passionate about everything. And I want to learn as much as I can. But in my excitement, I might overlook things that I find of no value for me. Because it might discredit what my actual belief is. So, say, changing someone's belief on anything is difficult, right? So if you have like a long-stemming belief how something is 100% right, it's going to be very difficult for me to prove to you that you're wrong. This is very hard for me to explain any other way. So hopefully I'm giving you a good explanation of what I'm talking about, but you always want to follow the scientific theory, do any historical research, and any research you do, you always want to find the conflicting evidence, right? Because that's the only way you're going to be able to piece around to tell the full story. So, okay, let me try to explain this a little bit better. So, in our theory, lollipops are great, and they're wonderful for us, and they have positive health benefits. When we set out to do research on this, our mind, it wants to only see the positive things. Anything that contradicts it, we are going to immediately try to shut out and not see. Because to us, lollipops are great. Any of those contradicting facts that tell us that our belief is wrong, we avoid at all cost. But that is not the scientific way. So if we follow the scientific way, we know that lollipops are full of sugar, they're bad for our health, they're bad for our teeth, so many dyes and chemicals, the list goes on and on and on and on. So now we've seen two different things. Lollipops are amazing and we love them, but lollipops are really bad. So what is the truth in the middle, right? So we have to use both sides so we know that a lollipop once in a while, it's fine. But because we have all of the evidence, we can make a good decision about lollipops. I hope that explains my long-winded explanation of a very simple thing. Okay. So we will continue with Charles Ewan. He's an archaeologist at East Carolina University, and he says that they're looking to prove rather than seeking to disprove their theory, which is the scientific way. Licketti's assertion hinges on dating the small pieces of pottery. No easy task, since styles remained the same for long periods of time. The ceramics at Site X and Site Y conceivably could have been left by later English traders which came from Jamestown, which was settled 2 decades after the failed attempt at Roanoke. Now, researchers agree, however, that the discovery of 2 separate caches strengthened Licketti's case. And he says that he has no problem with their interpretation of the ceramics in question as possibly late 16th century and potentially associated with the lost colony. Jacquie Pierce, a ceramic expert at the Museum of London, while all the pottery continued to be made well into the 17th century, she says it seems unlikely this particular collection of pots was made after 1650, when the first known English traders began to infiltrate the area. Still, the finds were mixed with soil plowed in subsequent centuries by later settlers and enslaved Africans, and the team has yet to find clear remains of an Elizabethan homestead. One must find artifacts of the known 16th century date in a stratigraphically sealed context, says Henry White, an archaeologist at the University of Michigan. One intriguing clue that points to Roanoke colonists rather than Jamestown traders is the lack of 17th century clay pipes at Site X and Site Y. Early Roanoke expeditions appropriated pipe smoking from the Native Americans, and Raleigh made it fashionable in England. So these were slender clay pipes with small bowls, and they were quite distinct from their indigenous counterparts in material and style. They were inevitable parts of any English trader's kit by the early 16th centuries, but these pipes did not turn up at Site Y. Pierce called the absence of these significant. If any of the inhabitants of the lost colony smoked, then they would have used native pipes rather than London-made ones, she said. So while Luccheti's team was digging at Site X, a group led by Mark Horton, then an archaeologist at the University of Bristol, was excavating the remains of a Native American village on today's Hatteras Island, the historical Croatoan. Working with volunteers from the Croatoan Archaeological Society, he uncovered European artifacts, including the hilt of a 16th century rapier and part of a gun. Scott Dawson, head of the society, said the artifacts provided evidence that the colonists assimilated with the Croatoan people. We now know not just where they went, but also what happened after they got there. He wrote of the colonists in a recent book. Horton, who has not yet published his finds, cautioned that these objects were all found in a context dating from the mid to late 17th century. That means they might be heirlooms passed down by the descendants of the colonists or later trade goods obtained from Jamestown. Lucchetti doubts that large numbers of Roanoke colonists descended on Croatoan, in part because environmental evidence indicates that rainfall was scarce in the decade following the settlers' arrival. You don't just dump, this is what he says, you don't just dump 100 people on an island in a drought, he said. But Horton said the discoveries from Site X and Y and Hatteras give credence to the increasingly popular theory that the lost colonists went their separate ways and merged into the local Native American communities. This is typical in situations like shipwrecks, he says. Order breaks down and you end up with several survivor camps, and there is a clear precedent in 1586. When food ran perilously short for members of the first Roanoke colony, its leaders dispersed his 100 settlers across the region, including to Croatoan, so they could forage, a tactic that proved successful until they could hitch a ride back to England. Dawson hopes to resume digs on other parts of Hatteras in the search for a survivors' camp, while Lucchetti's team also intends to continue their hunt. There is not enough data, but they should keep looking, says Ewan. So, 5 years earlier, in 2015, the National Geographic wrote that the search began. So in 2015, the National Geographic wrote, "We finally have clues to how the lost Roanoke colony vanished." And the search began when an anxious Englishman named John White waded ashore on North Carolina's Roanoke Island 425 years ago this month. This was in 2015. Appointed governor of the fledgling Roanoke colony by Sir Walter Raleigh, White was returning from England with desperately needed supplies. But when he stepped ashore on August 18th, 1590, he found the settlement looted and abandoned. The vanished colonists had left behind only 2 clues to their whereabouts: the word Croatoan carved on a prominent post, and CRO etched